Hello and welcome to the Morningside Nature Center here near my hometown of Gainesville, Florida. Today we're taking a look at the Canon PowerShot S110 digital camera. PowerShot S110 is an enthusiast level digital camera from Canon. It's a pocket camera, shoots HD video, 12 megapixel sensor, shoots raw files, touch screen, Wi-Fi, all the bells and whistles you could want. So today we're going to take this camera out here, put it through its paces, check it out, see how it works, and let you know what I think of it. Enjoy. So let's talk about some of the specs on the Canon S110. For starters, for our image processor, we have a 1/1.7 inch 12 megapixel CMOS sensor paired up with a Digic 5 image processor. The 1/1.7 inch sensor is going to let a lot more light into the camera. It's going to give you a much finer detailed image than most point and shoot pocket sized cameras. Much better image quality than say your cell phone. Much better noise reduction, much less noise in your images. Not quite up to par of say the 1-inch sensor of say a Sony RX100. But definitely going to give you noticeably better pictures than most other point-and-shoot cameras of its size, which is very impressive. We'll talk about the lens itself. The lens is a 5x zoom that starts out at about 25 millimeters, goes up to about 120 millimeters of 35 millimeter equivalent zoom. So you get a pretty decent wide angle, as well as a pretty good telephoto range. You can get in tight on some things with not too much difficulty. The lens is fairly fast. It starts out at an f2 aperture at 25 millimeters, and then as you zoom out into the telephoto range, it drops down pretty rapidly to an f5.9 is the maximum aperture at 120 millimeters. You know, still a little bit better than most other cameras of this size, but not the fastest lens in the world. It'll get the job done if you have to. You know, it's a reasonably fast lens paired up with a pretty good image processor. Okay, let's talk about the construction of the camera. It is an all-metal body, very, very rigid, very sturdy feeling, has a really good, nice weight to it. It does feature a 3-inch touchscreen. It has a glass touchscreen, very, very sensitive, just like a smartphone would be. Very easy to use as far as, you know, touching to focus, touching to take a picture, changing any kind of settings you might want to change. If you don't want to use the dials, you want to use the touch screen, you can do that. Let's talk about some of the other things on the camera. It does feature a control ring on the front of the lens. You can set this to control whatever type of aspects of your image you want to. You can use it as just a digital zoom. You could use it as setting your aperture speed, your shutter speed, your exposure compensation. You can actually do a manual focus with this if you'd like. It does feature a lot of different options for that control ring. You also have a secondary control ring here on the back, sort of around the directional pad. And you have your typical menu, playback, record buttons here. On the top you have your PSAM dial, as well as fully auto modes, movie mode, you know, sort of preset portrait modes, landscape modes, those type of things. It's pretty handy. And then you have your shutter button with a rocker switch, you know, in and out for zoom, your power switch, and then there is a pop-up flash that will pop up automatically, and if you're in one of the automatic modes, or you can manually set to fire the flash if you'd like. You know, it's a typical very small point and shoot camera type flash. You're going to get 10 to 15 feet maybe on the flash, but it's there in a pinch if you need it, need a little bit of extra light. Here on the right side of the camera, you do have your very typical mini USB and an HDMI out. Does not feature any kind of microphone input or headphones out. Just too small of a camera to have any of those kind of features. On the bottom of the camera, you do have your traditional 1/4-20 tripod socket there, thread there. It is an all-metal socket, so it's going to be very sturdy, very rigid, works really well. And then next to that, you have your battery door and your SD card slot. The battery is Canon NB-5L battery. It's rated at 1120 milliamp hours. Does decently well as far as battery life, gets you through a day if you're not constantly taking video or using it too much. It does a pretty good job. So let's talk about the touchscreen itself. As I said, it's a glass touchscreen, very simple, very sensitive to use. The screen is a 3-inch screen, it has 461,000 pixels, pretty clear, pretty bright screen. Unless you're in really bright sunlight, you get a pretty good view of what the image is going to turn out. One thing nice about Canon cameras is they do give you sort of a live view, kind of what you see is what you get as far as the exposure goes on the back of the screen. So that's really nice. You can also see a live histogram on the screen if you'd like, as well as just your traditional exposure meter kind of thing. And of course, this camera is very small, very pocketable. It's only 3.9 inches wide by 2.3 inches tall by only 1 inch thick. As I said, very easy to slide into a pocket. Not much to take in there, and it comes in at 7 ounces as far as the weight goes. Very easy. I've taken this with me to weddings when I'm actually in the wedding, and just slide it into my suit pocket. Nobody knows it's there, so it's really handy to have a really powerful camera with you that's really compact. The ISO range for the S110 is from 80 to 12,800, so a pretty good wide ISO range. I do recommend keeping the ISO as low as possible on this camera. Since this image sensor is not real large, it does get noisy once you start getting up above, say, 800 ISO, so try to keep the ISO down. The shutter speeds available to you are 15 seconds to 1/2000th of a second, and there is also a built-in neutral density filter that sort of flips down in front of the lens in case you need some extra darkening on a really bright day. That's really handy to have. You can also manually control that ND filter if you'd like. It's sort of just built into the body, and it flips down in place if you need some extra light reduction. So that's really nice. Drops down about a stop worth of light, I believe. Does do full HD 1920 by 1080 video at 24p. And last but not least, on the feature list for the S110, we have Wi-Fi that allows you to transfer images to your smartphone for uploading and editing. It also allows you to geotag images on the camera using a track you set up with your phone. You just start the Canon camera window app, tell it you're starting, beginning of the day, it tracks where you go throughout the day. And then later on, when you can sync it up with the camera, you can sync up the times, and the camera will know where you were at that time when the picture was taken, and be able to geotag your images for you automatically. Really handy function. So that's going to do it for the specs on the S110. Let's go take some more pictures and talk about the pros and cons and give you my final thoughts. Hey guys, I want to take a few minutes and go over some of the images I made with the Canon S110 when I was out there at Morningside the other day shooting this review. This first image just gives you an idea of the wide angle of the lens, which is 5.2 millimeters, which is equivalent to about a 24 millimeter on a full frame 35 millimeter camera. So this kind of gives you an idea of the field of view here. Pretty nice wide open field of view, feels pretty good. And then this next image is going to be focused on this tree down here, right where the trail curves around here. So you kind of see this is at the full zoom range of 120 millimeter equivalent, or 26 millimeters on this particular camera. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the zoom range of the camera. It's pretty decent, it does pretty well. Let's move on to the next image.
This next image is a macro shot at the full 26mm end of the lens. Kind of gives you an idea. The background is fairly soft back here. It's a few feet away back here to these plants that are behind the dragonfly back here. So it does a pretty good job, at the maximum 5.9 at the full extension of the lens. This next shot is an example of a macro shot at the wide angle of the lens at f2, which is the maximum aperture at that end of the lens, at the beginning of the lens. The background is soft. It's a little busy, but for a pocket-sized camera, it's pretty good. Here is something sort of in the middle of the range of the lens to kind of give you an idea of the sharpness, just sort of in the middle where it should be sharpened. It's pretty nice detail here in the bark on the tree, and then you still get a little bit of nice depth of field here. Pretty good. Here is another sort of a macro shot at the long end of the lens at 26mm. Nice detail in here. One thing I will say about this camera overall is that it tends to smudge the details a bit. When you're talking about a camera with a small sensor with a very small lens on it, you're just not going to get super high, crisp, sharp, detailed images. But this camera does quite well for what it is, and no concerns there as far as the image quality. It does well for what it is. Here's another shot at the wide angle of the lens, kind of into the treetops here kind of thing. Nice wide angle of view, so you can do nice things like this with it. Here is another macro shot, stop down just slightly to f2.5. You kind of get an idea of the detail with some nice out of focus areas. There's very short depth of field here, so that's really nice. You can do a lot of different interesting things here, and then you kind of get an idea of the sort of the sharpness of the lens here on this lizard here, just chilling out, getting some sun. So those are some of the images from the Canon S110, just giving an idea of the picture quality and its abilities at different aperture ranges. Not a whole lot of available aperture ranges. The minimum aperture is f8. It's just a small lens. It can't stop down any more than that. It does pretty well for what it is. So those are the images from the Canon S110.
So I'd like to talk about some of the pros and cons of the Canon S110 now that we've had a chance to shoot with it a bit. First thing I'm going to list as a pro on this camera are the controls. I really like to have the front control dial here as well as the dial on the backs of the camera. Really helpful. Just you shoot in full manual mode, you got your aperture on the front and your shutter speed on the back, and you're good to go. Really handy to have that. Next thing I'm going to list in the pro column is actually the touch screen. As I said, it's a glass touch screen. It's really nice to use. You can do pinch to zoom. It's really sensitive. It's really just a pleasure to use. It's really helpful. Once, it seems kind of weird to have a touchscreen on a camera, but once you start to use it, you'll wonder why you never had it before. It's kind of one of those kind of features. And then the third thing I'm going to list as a pro is the Wi-Fi functionality. It's always great to be able to take a really great picture with a really nice camera and be able to transfer it instantly over to your smartphone and share it instantly while you're still sort of right there in the moment. That's really cool feature to have. And the last thing I'm going to list as a pro on the S110 is the video quality. Canon has really great video quality, something they pay a lot of attention to. This camera does really well in low light as far as video, has stereo microphones on the front. Just a really great camera. If you're looking for something that where you gotta have video, definitely take a look at the S110. A lot of video bloggers love the S110 for its picture quality as far as video goes. So that's gonna do it for the pros. Let's take a second to list a few cons of the camera. It does have some shortfalls. The first thing being the menu system. It has a very traditional PowerShot menu system, which really doesn't work too well with the touchscreen functionality of the camera. If you're digging through a menu, you're trying to, trying to change a setting that's a little more difficult buried down in the menu. It can be a little bit difficult to control that through the touch screen. It's a PowerShot menu. It's not designed to be a touch kind of interface. It's meant to be sort of a scrolly, clicky kind of interface. So I really wish they would have thought about that more, that this camera has a touch screen, and redesigned the menu to be more like a quick menu kind of thing, like we have on the EOS camera T4i here that I'm shooting this video with. So that's definitely a downside of this camera. Second thing I'm going to list as a negative on the camera, even though it does have a fast 2.0 aperture at the widest setting, it steps down really fast. It goes all the way down to 5.9 very quickly once you start to zoom in. So I wish it had a little bit of a faster lens. I believe the S120 does have a slightly faster lens if that's something that's important to you. But not going to be in the same budget range as the S110. And the last con I'm going to list for this camera is slightly with the having to do with the ergonomics of the camera. If you hold your thumb right here on the thumb pad on the back of the camera and hold the camera in the front like they want you to, your finger really doesn't fall to where the shutter button is. Your finger falls to where the mode dial is on the top. It's really difficult to reach the shutter button if you're holding this camera how it was designed to be held. So a little bit of a funky design. I wish they really would have swapped the shutter button with the control dial on this camera. It would have made it work a lot better from an ergonomic standpoint. So that's going to wrap up my review of the Canon S110 PowerShot camera, enthusiast pocket camera. Really great take-with-you kind of camera that does great video, takes great pictures, has Wi-Fi functionality, has a touch screen, has a lot of great features built into a really small package. So thanks for watching this review of the S110. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes below to a gallery on Flickr if you want to see any of the test shots close up. Pixel peep them to your heart's content. Get to check those out for yourself. If you like this review, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. I got a lot more camera reviews, photography related things, beer reviews, record stuff. A lot of stuff going on here on the channel. Hope you find it all interesting. Thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again real soon. Have a great day. Bye.